Welcome back to Terror of the Book Report. That's what I'm thinking of calling this format. Do you like it? Commenters whose opinion I trust, you know who you are, please write down any suitable alternatives. It is, after all, how I got this channel name. So, on to the second book in the Cat's Cradle trilogy, and the first half of the War trilogy. Trilogies inside trilogies. VNA's cubed. Why is this so complicated? Oh, it's by Andrew Cartmel. Yep. This book is penned by the script editor of the McCoy era himself and Thatcher's least favourite Whovian, besides RTD, and the rest of us. So it's Happiness Patrol or Paradise Towers, but with the dial that reads camp turned a few notches down, and the anarchistic anger dial turned all the way up. At least that was my expectation going into this. One potential reading adjacent to Popperina's thoughts on the novel is that Warhead and its portrayal of the Doctor is a sort of director's cut of Seven's run. If I'm remembering correctly, Popperina described this one as cyberpunk, but with more emphasis on punk than cyber. Perhaps cyber-light? It's set in the near future, with tech that's not that much better than what they had at the time of writing. Corporations who hold unchecked amounts of power are destroying the planet's environment. But enough about real life, tell us about this book, Ben. Ha 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 ha, we're all going to die. So there's acid rain, the very air has been tainted by pollution, our lifespans are being hacked down to the bone, and to make matters worse, the traffic is simply ghastly. So the Butler Institute, run by a man called O'Hara, has devised a way for the rich first, at least, to insert their minds into computers and live on. I've not read much cyberpunk, but I think this is something of a staple in the genre, and funnily enough, it's come up in several new Who Cybermen stories. The Doctor, especially this Doctor, is naturally going to want to put a stop to it. To that end, he tracks down a comics-loving, nerdy teenager with psychic powers, and an angry environmentalist activist witch. His plan is to get the kid to absorb all the rage induced by her doom-scrolling and use it to take out the Butler Institute machinery, ruining their plans for immortality so they have no choice but to start fixing the planet. Yeah, my parents did something similar to my Xbox when they wanted me to move out. This book's portrayal of the Doctor. You're either going to click with it, or it's going to leave you cold. Honestly, the bits that took me by surprise were not the bits that you might expect, because in some ways, Seven here just reminds me of Eccleston in Rose. A distant, mysterious, often cold Doctor, dead focused on fighting his battles. Hell, his exchange with Maria isn't too far from Nine's outburst in Bad Wolf, or even Seven's judgment of Gwendoline in Ghostlight. But as opposed to someone actually carrying out the awful acts as it was in those cases, this is just a cleaner who works in the same building who can't possibly be expected to overthrow this massive corporation. At the same time, if you had to spend every day ignoring something horrible, what would that make you? The particular black dog leaving unpleasant stains on my bed was my thought process as to whether this Doctor would leave me to die, and then wondering whether he would be wrong to. So the only part of this book that I think really jarred for me in terms of Seven's behaviour was him hiring a knife-wielding gang to collect dangerous people of interest for him. If the new series tried to do something like this, it would end up probably looking very twee, with the Doctor role-playing as a sort of light-hearted Fagin. But here we have Ace hiring honest-to-goodness mercenaries and taking part in weapons tech dealing. It's not even a question of strictly tone, it's just not what we expect a Doctor companion to be doing. But even if all this bothers you, Seven is kept at a distance. Sandifer makes the comparison to the Dr. Light stories we get in New Who. Most of this book is set from the perspective of incidental characters. Now, if you know anything about me, you know this is the kind of thing I leap out at. I'll seize any opportunity to whinge about how we've kind of done everything we can with the Doctor, and they should really be made into more of a secondary character. Especially in books. Ideally, I want POVs from everyone else but him. Now, the savvy members of my audience, yes, I'm talking about you at the back, your ears may have pricked at my use of the word
sounds there. It sounds like my kind of thing. Realizing that you're still awake at 4 in the morning, so you decide to abandon the concept of sleep sounds like a good idea. I've yet to come out and say whether I like the book itself, and you may have even detected a certain bit of enthusiasm deficiency from this particular emission. So I'll just stop foreshadowing and say that I didn't have a great time with this book overall. Hence why this video has taken so fucking long. And this sucks for numerous reasons. I was really looking forward to this one, I really rate Cartmel's work on the show, and there is a lot here that I really like. The consistent strength of this book is that Cartmel has crafted such a vivid and lived-in world. I can see and hear this dystopian future in my head as clear as day, and that's not just because of its frightening resemblance to the world we live in now. The writing goes beyond its intended goal, filling in spaces that I'm unsure need to be filled in. Like how long it takes for Ace to demonstrate the technology of this helmet she's giving away in an arms trade, or a whole chapter dedicated to her and Seven getting a vehicle in between stages of their plan. Unlike Blink, Love and Monsters, or Turn Left, we're not following a single character we're invested in. We're cutting between several of them. I don't think that's impossible to do in the Dr. Light structure, and I actually think Cartmel creates enough really interesting characters with well done motivations. It really rewards you paying attention to the names Magnus Archive style, because we'll return to them, and in some cases we'll get a recontextualization that makes up for not being able to see these arcs play out. But even with all of this good stuff, Warhead struggles to build momentum. If you were to plot my engagement on a line graph, it would zigzag like I do when I leave a conversation with my housemates and they happen to be washing some very throwable knives. By the halfway mark, I knew what the villain's general plan was, but I didn't know when it would happen, there was no time frame, and I had no clear idea of what the Doctor was even doing all this time to stop it. It does come together satisfyingly in the end, but the whole resolution feels a little perfunced, and that's a tad galling considering there was about 80 or so pages of this 260-page book where I did just zone out. Which is a shame, because even if I was unaware of the writer behind this, the skill and talent is on display, especially in the opening chapters where Seven is visiting a character from Survival who's dying in a hospital. Remember this little girl? Yeah, she's dead. Thatcher killed her. There are moments of genius, like the twist that a bunch of soldiers on the island that Ace and the mercenaries are attacking are all children. And the villain deserves serious props. Doctor Who's had plenty of slimy capitalists, but I think O'Hara manages to outdo them all. First off, it's how he's introduced. We never see him in a work setting, as you'd expect. He's not behind a desk in an office. Instead, he's at home. We know what TV his kid likes to watch. We know his wife's name. And this cozy environment makes him even more off-putting, especially as we learn more about his psyche and how it contrasts with all of this. And this book has possibly my favourite version of villain explains his evil scheme ever. O'Hara has his kid, Patrick, tell his underlings the whole plan like it's a really exciting holiday or something. It's skin crawling. There's other great stuff in here through the character of Justine. The novel briefly touches on the link between witchcraft and anti-capitalism. Abigail Thorne did a really great video on that a while back. But if I may return to my quibbles, let's get to the one that's probably going to get me crucified. I think Ace was starting to become dead weight around this point in Seven's era. Oh, do you know how much that hurt to write, never mind say? But maybe that's the one downside of being the most developed character in a show that kinda struggled with that stuff. I'm not sure there's any room left in the concept to explore, and it feels like any of that unfulfilled potential left over from the series' premature cancellation has already been made up for by Time Worm Revelation. Hell, even if the show hadn't been cancelled, Aldred was probably going to be on her way out within a couple of stories anyway. By the 6th novel, we've gone well past that point. So we're left with sequels to Ghostlight and Fenric, and it's kind of like if they tried to give James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2 more appearances. That's not quite the case here, because the story is not about her as such, so maybe I'm just harping on because her first 2 chapters where she's just working with this gang of Kurdish killers was where the pacing completely screeched to a halt.
But I'm reading her go about morally complex scenarios where she's just on her own, surviving, kind of like in the last book, and her reactions are all very well written and very human, but none of it's making an impression with me. I'm told that her post-Love and War stuff is a bit controversial, but I'll take that over this nebulous dead zone between there and survival, and may Lucifer rise if I come to regret that remark. So yeah, that's Cat's Cradle Warhead. I couldn't bear to read about a quarter of it. 5 stars. I've been looking at some stuff Cartmel has said about this book, and while true no one's more critical of a work than its own writer, I wholeheartedly agree with his assessment here. Like Time's Crucible, I'm glad this exists, I'm just not eager to return to it, even though the whole context might improve some stuff on a second read-through. I guess at this point in the VNAs, especially with these last 3 books, I've been taking in bold visions for Doctor Who's future. What I really want is something that builds on these ideas. I want to pick up a VNA that feels like a story first and a pitch second, you know? Gosh, imagine Doctor Who having too many new ideas. Can you imagine?